What's up, you filthy heathens? This is Jeremiah with the God Theory podcast. Hey, we didn't make it last week. I'm sure some of you saw. No, sorry, made it last week. I didn't upload it because it's had some kind of internal server error when I was uploading it. I did put it up Thursday, so it's there now. But I apologize for that. It uploaded, but it was just like the title and the description.
Yeah.
And occasionally Libsyn does that, where you try to upload the MP3. And, you go through all that editing and everything. You finally get it there. You're like, all right, great. You upload the MP3, and then it's like uploading, and then it's like, oh, error, didn't work. And if you're smart, you kind of watch it, and you're like, oh, well, it did that. And then you re-upload it. But I did not. I was tired, and I just hit send, and I didn't realize it didn't work. So a lot of people were like, I can't play it.
The podcast equivalent of the dog ate my homework, but it did happen. The dog ate our homework.
Yeah, legit. Yeah, I wish I could get my dog to eat some of my homework now. I just cover it in peanut butter and be like, do me a solid, buddy. I need an excuse not to do this. But yeah, so we are talking today about, we wanted to do, okay, so we're going to give you guys our dilemma, okay? We ran into a little bit of a problem. We were originally going to do this on a different topic. What was that topic?
We're going to talk about a religious school and a professor kind of being a dick. Just talking with JT, who used to work for the Secular Student Alliance, so he's got experience with that, and just get his take on, like, what do you do when you're in a religious school and they're just being, you don't really have any legal recourse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was going to be pretty cool, especially because this was a listener had put in this personal experience, and we really wanted to make it a good quality episode, but we ran into a little trouble. So JT can't make it today, our recording day, and David, you are disposed tomorrow. You are.
Yeah, I am on a road trip for 13 hours tomorrow, so that makes it hard to record.
Yeah, so like getting home after all that, and plus, oh man, you're just having the worst week, which kind of segues into our topic. So why don't you tell us about what's going on in your life, David?
Okay, for those of you who listen to the Game Theory podcast, you're familiar with the sob story, but I'm going to repeat it because it's fun to talk about how many problems I have. So here's how the last couple of weeks have been for me. First of all, I've been wearing these contacts for my whole life. Suddenly, my left eye is like, oh, I'm horribly allergic to your contacts, or there's a scratch or something. It reacts as if I'm putting like allergens directly into my eyeball because it just gets all puffy and red and starts watering for no reason. It's just a contact lens. So I have been forced for the past 2 weeks to wear my glasses, which I got 10 years ago. They're wildly out of date.
Hilarious. Okay.
So those nearsighted people in the audience, which is probably like 90% of the human species by now, because it seems to be a dominant gene, being able to be nearsighted. You know the dilemma. Like, you're blind, you're slightly less blind, but it's still not ideal. You still can't see very well, and it colors your whole perception of reality. Everything sucks when you can't see very, very well. It's one of those things that you don't miss until it's gone. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing to go. I'm like, all right, well, that limits what I can do, but I can still play The Witcher 3 on my computer. I can sit close to my screen. Well, next thing to go was my computer. It just stops working. It goes into this infinite reboot loop. It's a Windows 10 thing, I think. I don't know how to fix it. So that's happening. So my computer dies. Now, I run a video game podcast. Computers are important for that. Even recording podcasts in general, you want a computer for that. I'm on my phone right now.
Okay.
So that's number two.
So you can't see well, you can't play games to do the research for the podcast, and you can't record the podcast well.
And let me reiterate, when you can't see well, it makes everything else suck. So I can't even I'm just not motivated to try and fix my computer because everything is just a blur.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, well, that sucks. But at least I've got my car. No, my car starts making grinding sounds. It turns out that's a problem. So I have to get my brakes replaced, and that means I have to get my wheels replaced and my axles replaced. It ends up costing $500, which is money that probably could have gone to fixing my computer, but now it's just going on the credit card as random debt for no reason.
So anytime you have to go get supplies or something, that's a gamble with your life because you can't see, right?
Right.
And you can't stop.
Oh, and the roads are bad because I live in Colorado, so it's snowing on me with my bad brakes and my bad tires.
This is awesome.
I go to get those fixed, and first of all, the weather's so bad that I literally cannot get back to the mechanic to get my car once they fix it. So I end up snowed in at a friend's house, and I'm like, I remember saying to her, I was like, hey, I feel, you know that feeling you get when you feel like you're getting sick, but you're not sick yet? Like, I feel like my throat's going to have an infection soon. The next day, Sunday morning, I wake up, the roads are still really bad, and I have no voice now. I've got a sore throat and a head cold, and I'm blind, and I've got to go pay $500 for car repair. And when I get home, my computer's broken. So just everything all at once just broke on me.
Hmm.
And even right now, you probably could hear I've got a head cold, just full of Dayquil, just trying to like medicate myself through it.
Oh my gosh, that is the worst, man.
Yeah, so life sucks.
So a lot's going on, man. You're getting shit on.
Yeah, everything's happening at once, and these are all first world problems, right? Like I don't have AIDS, I'm not in a war torn Somalia, but for my normal standard of happiness, things are shitty.
Like Liam Neeson, whenever he's like, she's a prostitute. She's riddled with AIDS.
She's
Full-blown AIDS.
riddled with AIDS, full blown AIDS. She had to turn to it. She had no recourse financially, so she had to turn to prostitution.
And you're like, oh, I don't feel like that's good for improvisation. But
I love Liam Neeson, but you know that.
yeah, don't you have a shrine to him now?
Yeah, actually, said friend who let me stay at her house when I was sick. She for Christmas, what she calls Liamness, spelled Liam Ness, like the quality of being Liam.
Yeah.
She as a gift, she gave me like a Spider-Man shirt, but the best gift she gave me for Christmas was this statue of Liam Neeson that's been spray painted gold, and then she glued it to like a platform with like a candle, so it's like a little shrine, like a portable shrine that I can put everywhere. And you know, like cats are entranced by open flames, so what I'll do is I'll light the candle and I'll put it on the ground. And my cat will just stare at it for hours, like wagging his tail, like he's venerating the god of Liam Neeson.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Have you said your prayers? You have not.
say it. So, you know, there's still good in the world. But overall, I'm having a pretty bad week. And I'm about to go on a road trip with bad eyesight, and I'm sick, and it's a 13-hour drive with a cat. That's going to happen tomorrow.
I think this is interesting and how it relates to religion and skepticism, secularism, and dirty heathenism. It's funny. It came up. You were just discussing your situation. I was like, man, you're in a bad spot, man. And I was like, life's, ups and downs. You get those weeks where you just walk on clouds, and you get those weeks like this where you just get shit on.
Everything happens.
Yeah, and it's funny because it made me think about, when you were talking about prosperity doctrine the other day, on the podcast a while back, and how, if you're good things happen to you. It's prosperity doctrine is one way to talk about it. Another way would be in psychology, we call it the just world hypothesis. We all feel that the world,
if you pay your dues, the world will be good to you, and if you don't, then bad things will happen.
Yeah, and we've gone over what that's all about. But it's funny that religion plays into that a lot, because my first thought was, I was like, oh my gosh, God is cursing you, right? It's some of that residual religion, which is funny because, so the idea was this: does being an atheist, does it make it worse or better?
Yeah, and this is the conventional wisdom. Whenever we look at these studies about religion, even like secular studies, they'll say that, religion is all superstition. Let's just go with that preconceived idea. Like, let's just make that the case. Religion is all superstition evolved, but it serves a function. It helps you become more mentally healthy, because when you do these studies, we always see that religious people, they live longer, they have better health, they have better social networks. And so the idea is like religion is better for your mental health, even if it's wrong. And I push back against that, because community, yes, is better for your mental health. Not just this show, but the idea of having a support structure, yes, that is better for your health. It's nice to know that when I move, there's people in my church who will help me like unpack and pack. But I think that atheism is actually better for my mental health, and I've had these thoughts before. I've had shitty times in the past when I was religious, and I thought to myself, man, life sucks. I'm suffering. I'm sick, human frailty. Everything's wrong. I've got all these problems. But if I kill myself, I'll go to the celestial kingdom, which is not the best level of heaven, but it's better than this, right? And Mormonism is kind of unique because they don't have a hell, so maybe that factors into it. But I remember seriously consider suicide over trivial things, because I thought I would be in a better place than I am right now. And that's what we always say, right? They've gone on to a better place.
Yeah.
But now as an atheist, these things seem so trivial compared to not existing. Like no amount of head cold and shitty like financial problems and bad days. I know it's all transitory. Whereas if I kill myself, that's the end. I'm done. It's over. So in a way, I feel like atheism is the healthier position, at least compared to Mormonism.
Right. It feels like, I've noticed that whenever I talk to people who are experts and stuff, they almost always answer with this. You try to get a simple answer out of them. You're like, is this good or is this bad? And they almost always say it's both, or it's nuanced, right? No, there's a lot going on there, something like that. And it's the annoying thing about that, but it's almost always true. So I was kind of thinking about that here. What's the good and bad that it brings? And I think that is one, is that, there's the afterlife. That, religion can bring you a lot of comfort because it buys you a certainty, right? Like in therapy, a lot of times I say this, like, let's say I'm talking to someone with GAD, right? Generalized anxiety disorder, or someone who just worries a lot. They're subclinical, or someone who's depressed, but typically it's anxiety and worry. Is you say, what is it that you're doing? What are you thinking about when you're ruminating, when you're, having these thoughts that keep coming to your head, and you're really sticking on to them. You're just putting them in there, and the engine's going, and it's thinking about something. What is it doing? And it's problem solving, typically, for rumination. It's trying to find out, think of every possible solution, bad solution, and then coming up with an answer to it. And there's some functionality to that. Like, let's say you think to yourself, when I go in to teach that class tomorrow, I might walk in with my pants unzipped. Okay, so I'll just check my pants before I go in. 2, what if I start mumbling and I don't know where I'm going? Okay, well, I'll make notes. 3, there's the bad ones of, like, what if I just get, like, super sick or something? I throw up on stage. Well, okay, there's not much I can do about that. I'll just, I don't know. I'll just think about that, and that sucks. But so going through all those thought processes, but the funny thing is that's normal. It's normal to problem solve situations that could be bad. What's not normal, or when it becomes or starts to become clinical, is whenever they start ruminating and it starts negatively affecting them, right? Like they get to some degree where it's causing stress and anxiety, right? Like to an unhealthy degree. A little anxiety is good, a little kind of nervousness, little, palms sweaty during a speech, that's fine. Especially if you're in an athletic type thing or something where you're using gross motor movements. But that's okay. But there's always a point where it goes over the line, and that's when it becomes clinical. And I always say, so you're purchasing a certain amount of certainty, right? Like if they don't understand why they're worrying, once we discover that, and we're like, okay, so it looks like, you're thinking about these situations. You're trying to be as prepared as possible. A lot of times I try to find buzzwords that they'll identify with. Prepared is usually one of them. I say, so you're just someone who's prepared for any situation. That's almost always a head nod. And I'm like, okay, so this preparation, it's buying you what? Like, if you went in without preparing, what would you do? And they'd be like, I'd just be so uncertain. I'm not okay with that. And a lot of worry is a little bit of a phobia of uncertainty. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to think about going to a situation without worrying about it first.
Right. They want that peace of mind so badly that it becomes very paralyzing not to have it.
Right. And so how does that relate? Well, it's the same thing. You're purchasing certainty, or a certain level of certainty. No one can ever know for sure. But if you know, or if you're buying the idea and you are letting yourself be quote unquote certain about it, and letting it be true with a capital T, that God is in charge of everything, whatever God you attribute to, but let's say he's all powerful. You're buying yourself a cool certainty that when things go well, that you're doing good, and that you're buying yourself into the afterlife. And when things go poorly, you're that if you just fix some things, it'll be better.
We crave the feeling of control over things like that, and religion kind of gives you that. Like if everything's going wrong and I can say, well, it's because I masturbated yesterday and God's punishing me, then at least I feel like I could change something about my behavior that will change the result.
Yeah, exactly. And that gives then you start working, and by correlation things get better. Sure. And you attribute causality. Great. I did these different things. Now I know I'm in God's good standing, and that's a pleasurable feeling. Like you've got purpose in life. There's this, giant dude watching over you. That's awesome. But I always ask them, I'm like, okay, so you purchase yourself a certain certainty every day when you worry about things for the next day. At what cost? And that's what I was wondering about here. Like here, during these moments of like shittiness, right? And life sucks.
Yeah.
I was wondering, and there's never been a study, would atheism predict that someone is more likely or less likely to fall into depression when they have these stressful life events?
Yeah.
Or kill themselves?
Yeah, these are serious issues. I want to trivialize like people who actually do suffer from depression, but I do think that for me personally, in my own experience, having lived both sides of the spectrum, there's something almost liberating knowing that there's nothing I could have done differently to make these things not happen, right? Like there's no deity I could have appeased. There's no behavior going to church wouldn't have helped. Paying my tithing wouldn't have helped. Like these things just happened to me, And because they happen randomly, there's some part of me that says, okay, there's nothing I could have done differently. I just have to wait it out. And it's a transitory experience.
Yeah. And really what that is, there's this thing called cognitive fusion, right? And I think this is such an important, cool thing to talk about. But in general, I think about this. But we often have this thought or this desire to do something, and then we just do it, right? There's like there's no latency there. There's no gap, right? Like if I go, oh, I'm gonna order some pizza, then I just order it. Right. And the funny thing is in acceptance commitment therapy, one of the evidence-based approaches to different disorders, depending on what you've got, it has people rest in that level of uncertainty. Just take a minute and be there. Like, and that's weird. It's like, it's weird to sit there and think to yourself, I don't know. And then not think about it. Like if someone says, are you about to die or something, some consequence. Now that's a little crazy, but like, do you want to go get something to eat? It's funny that a lot of people, as soon as you hear that, you think, I don't know. And you immediately go into thinking, which, is fine. And it's a good practice to do, solve your problems when they come up. But after a while, it becomes habituated, and we start thinking, and we have the thought, and then we do, which is fine, except when it's not fine. And sometimes it's not fine whenever you have things like these desire, like these thoughts. Or what was the example you gave? I'm trying to bring myself back to that.
I mean, a drastic example would be suicide, right? Like most people who attempt suicide that are unsuccessful, I forget what the statistic is, but the great majority of them do not try it again. It's something they would have regretted had they been successful, but it's an impulse decision.
Right. And I remember what it was. You were saying that I think it just lost again. You were oh man, you were talking about the fact that shit, I forgot. Holy crap.
There's nothing I could have done differently. And
yeah, that's it. Okay. Yeah, like that is defusing you from the necessity of an action, right? And we're so quick to get to that. We want to get to that, whether it's do the thing that you need to do, right? Like if it's sitting in front of you and you're like, oh man, like example, a lot of people get into trouble in marriages because they try to solve the other person's problem right away because they don't want to be there in that moment. It causes discomfort if you're empathetic. And so if you're talking to your spouse or to anyone and they're like, this is something I've had to try to learn, is just be there in the moment with, my wife or, my kids or whoever. People find it comforting to have someone be there with them before they solve it. So like if someone's talking to me and I'm like, oh, it's, and somebody says, oh my gosh, all these things happen to me. Like if you did, I'd be like, oh man, that sucks. That sucks, dude. And then you're like, it does, and man. And then you kind of lament some more. You're like, oh, here's how it sucks. And then I'm like, yeah, that's a bad spot. And without saying, what are you going to do or what's next? It's hard for me. And it's because it's probably hard for you too. If you had the answer, you just probably fix your problem.
Right.
But so you can go about it a few different ways. But one is solve your problem. Then you're unfused from that uncertainty facing you or the push to do something. Or you can or you can say, oh, I'm helpless in this. Oh, I'll throw up my hands. Then you've defused yourself from that action, from the necessitation of an action. You can also use mindfulness, which, just lets you just be there and you don't have to solve it and you're fine with it. But I think that's what that's buying you, and I think that's just maybe a healthier way to do it, at least in this circumstance with depression.
I think sometimes accepting the helplessness, accepting that there's nothing you could do differently, it relieves you of the stressor of feeling like you should do something differently, or even worse, that you should have done something differently.
Yeah, there's a certain. I mean, the myth of that, like we have destiny and that the things we do matter. It's useful in a lot of times because it attributes meaning to things, and there's a lot of meaningless shit we do. And one portion of therapy in certain situations, like this can work in depression a lot, is attaching values based. You teach people to move towards values rather than move away from discomfort. So you can do something because you don't want to be late on a paper and you finish the paper, or you could do it because you're like, oh, I want to be a good student. What would a good student do? Oh, they would do this. I'm going to do that thing. Those are two different ways to go about getting a goal done. And one of those has a taxing effect on us. It kicks up our cortisol, in general, it causes stress, and it has a predictor for heart disease and other, poor outcomes. I'm not sure all that particular part has been tied to, but in general, when we look at those effects, they're very negative. The other one, values-based decision-making, is actually really good. And it's what we see both correlationally and causally in people who are functioning well. And so, so it buys you that. You get to feel like everything you do is super important, right?
Right.
So there's that going on. But then, oh my gosh, when things like this happen, you feel like I'm doing everything wrong, and that just adds on top of the shit, doesn't it?
Yeah, or even the most like positive way to look at it religiously would be, God's testing you, right? Like he won't give me anything that I can't handle. This is just it's going to make me stronger. There still is something it still gives it a weight that maybe I don't think it's healthy to assign. The people on the outside, I'm taking this more philosophically than psychologically because that's my training. But people on the outside, they look at nihilism and they see it as a very like soul crushing, like nihilistic. You never hear that as a positive adjective, right?
Right.
Like it's soul crushing. Like, oh, if there's no great purpose, then what's the point? Like
Right.
That's kind of how people approach it. But
Nobody's inviting nihilists to parties. They're like, we need a nihilist up in this bitch.
It's like there's no nihilistic therapy where you just go and you're like, hey, can you tell me how nothing matters and there's no grand purpose?
That's pretty much this podcast.
yeah, nihilistic therapy. But existentialism is it's very similar, but Camus says we must imagine Sisyphus happy. And what he means is the guy pushing up the boulder that's going to roll back down the hill eventually, if you see him as being tortured, that's how he's going to feel. But if he assigns arbitrary purpose to it, he's going to feel better. Sometimes the acceptance that there is no greater purpose, and I think atheism provides this where religion doesn't, the acceptance that everything is inherently meaningless sort of takes the pressure off. It takes the weight off of having to assign a meaning to things that seem arbitrary.
Well, that's the funny.
And you're able to accept things like the past 2 weeks of my life without feeling like I have to fight against it.
Yeah. And the funny thing is I end up falling into this conceptualization a lot whenever I'm talking to people, in what I do. And it's I talk to them and I say, it sounds like what happens is you found yourself in a valley at this point, and you know that there's a better place over the hill. Like, let's say you're in a valley and you're just moving forward. You're just in a rut, right? But you're moving forward and you're like, I know that it's a better way of life over the mountain to my right, but I just kind of want to keep going straight. It's easier, I realize that, but I'm just not willing to walk over this mountain to get it done. And I think a lot of people do that. They take the easier route because it's easier in the short run, even though they know that in the long run, like there was that study that came out from the CDC, I believe, that said a little over 80% of all deaths in humanity is behavioral decisions that we've made. Like psychology is extremely important. Yeah, like and this is something that psychology can prove, and this is why I'm so upset whenever we're working towards something called mental health parity, which means that in insurance we're treated equally as regular health services, because we should probably be more. Almost all medical problems, is what it was saying, is preventative from behavior,
right?
Not all.
An ounce of prevention is equal to a pound of cure.
Exactly, and we've already taken that stance in medicine, or they have already taken that stance in medicine, but they haven't taken it seriously, right? They haven't quite gone the full route and said, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should get some behavioral medicine people. And we're a hugely growing branch of behavioral medicine, but still. I think that's what's going on here. People they don't want to look at life nihilistically because it's easier to kind of just live, like getting over the hump. In fact, how about believers that do this, right? Like I know a lot of people who aren't atheists because they're like, I just not comfortable with where that puts me.
I couldn't live in a world like that. Like, what's the point? It's what you hear most often from believers who are honest enough to say that, like, it's not just truth value, it's also comfort that I get from this religion. But I think I want to push back against that. I think that having lived on both sides of the believing fence, I find more comfort in a nihilistic view than I do in like, if I thought a God was behind all this and he was just testing me, that's like a shitty way to live life. Like, oh, good, you gotta pass this test so I don't get failed. Like, to me, there is comfort in the idea that some things are just random and you just have to, get through them, and then they're going to pass because that's how random events are. If they were the same all the time, it wouldn't be random. It'd just be the status quo.
I wonder if it's like, so you can get this thing in psychology that we do in behaviorism. It's called an establishing operation. And what that means is it makes things more, a magnitude of your reinforcer or punisher bigger or smaller. But in this example, bigger. So, for example, if you make a mouse hungry, right, before you let it do the food task or the task where the food is reinforcer,
then you give a mouse a cookie and he wants a glass of milk.
I love those books. But yeah, you've now made it more. The reinforcement is larger for the same reward because you set it up in a way that it would be that way, right?
Right.
Sort of like holding the 30-day no masturbation challenge. Have you heard about that?
I've seen the Seinfeld episode.
Oh, okay. People are nuts about it.
Master of my domain.
Yeah. A lot of people were big on it in Reddit recently. So anyway, I was not in that camp. I'm like, oh, hell no. But I'm just kidding. So establishing operation, making things the magnitude bigger. I wonder if that's what religion does. It kind of makes it can make the bad worse, but it can also make the good better, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I just really want to push back against the conventional wisdom that I'd rather be Socrates discontent than a happy pig. Like there's kind of an accepted notion that you can be happy and ignorant, or you can face reality the way it is but be sad, right?
Yeah.
Like the stark reality, the random depressive nihilism. I want to push back against that. I really think that, and this shouldn't have any relevance. Like, you shouldn't decide what your worldview is, what true is, based on how much comfort it gives you.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to push back against the idea that there's no comfort to be found in atheism. I find the idea of no God to be more of a comfort than the idea of a God. The idea of random, meaningless coincidences. There's something to be said for that. It's not the soul crushing like depression that people seem to assign it.
What if that's biased though? What if you're saying that because you're on this side of the fence? What if we went backwards and started as atheists and then became a believer of some kind?
Yeah, the confirmation bias, like because that's what I believe, I want it to be healthy.
Yeah.
It could be. I'd be interested to see a study though. That's why I want to see data on like mental health and religion, because in my, albeit subjective experience, I feel this way of thinking seems to provide me with some relief.
Yeah, I feel that way too, but I also know we might be biased. But I still, even that though, I still think it's probably right. Like, we don't buy ourselves. That's the thing with those data that, the ones that I've looked at from the papers where I haven't just been behind a paywall and read the abstract when it's talk about religion and happiness. The limitation section, they almost always mention that it's it's correlative data, correlative, and we just don't know.
And it's usually limited to American participants, right?
Well, they've done a couple others, I believe.
Do they see the same effects in places where religion isn't the dominant worldview? Because my suspicion is if you're in the majority position, then you're going to have positive effects because you have that sense of community.
That's probably true too, because of the fact that if you take overall countries that are more or less religious, then it's inverse relationship to happiness, right?
Right. Yeah, like the happiest countries by every measurable statistic end up being the more atheistic, more secular countries like Sweden or Japan.
Yeah. Although I've wondered about something. I wonder, one of the fastest growing branches of psychology, oddly, is geriatric psychology. So with
that makes sense because it's a fast-growing demographic.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're probably right. I see. This is how little I have to desire to do work with that population, because a lot of it is depression, anxiety, things that happen, later in life, but also existential crises. And I'm not touching that with a fucking 30-foot pole, bitch. That is that already plagues me. Occasionally I'm just like, oh my God, I don't mean anything. It's just these moments, that you get from moving from a paradigm. I never had to face those as a youth, right? Because I had religion. So I'm experiencing them now. And it's just with the skill set we have now and the thinking power we have now, being just now having this, versus being a kid and just being like, oh, okay, well, it doesn't matter. And just slowly being attenuating to it is it's crazy.
And that's why I push back against the idea that existential crisis has to be a crisis, because for me, one of the greatest books ever written is an existential fable called The Little Prince. It's a French children's story, but it deals with these ideas of meaning and significance, and the fact that death happens and separation happens, and ultimately what matters is the meaning that we assign things. And coming to terms with that at a young age, the way French children do who grow up with this book, I don't know, I find it very comforting. More I'm not afraid of not having an ultimate meaning. I embrace it, because the whole point of existentialism is that there is no capital T truth, but we can assign meaning. And just because it's not capital T truth meaning doesn't make it any less meaningful for us subjectively.
Yeah, that level of relativism, I just don't think is a big part of our culture.
It's not.
I say that anecdotally from my point of view as well, because I was that's a big part. If we do values-based work at the beginning, if that's part of the modules for whatever I'm treating, it's very often a novel concept. Yeah. Whenever I'm like, well, there's nothing in and of itself has any value or meaning, and people are like, what? And so I can't even say that. I have to remember, you have to make people think that they came up with the idea, so you got to approach it a whole different way.
Yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson has a great. Someone asked him in a Q&A, like, what is like the if there's no God, like, what's the purpose of life? What's the meaning of life? And he's like, why does there have to be a purpose of life? Why can't it be the purpose we give it? And that's a very French. That's not an American thought. That's a very existential thought, which just seems foreign to our way of thinking culturally.
Yeah, it's funny, but yeah, man, I don't know, dude. I know that it's brought me comfort. I've had times where, I mean, where things bad have happened, and just being able to, unfuse myself from having to take an action, because
Right.
like if you believe that everything we do matters, everything happens for a reason, the principle of sufficient reason in philosophy, everything happens for a reason, then you can just say, well, actually, this isn't that's a misapplication. Anyway, whatever. Is that that everything you do has meaning? I mean, that just ups the ante. It makes
Right.
everything more important.
It puts an impetus for us to act, right? Because
Yeah.
if everything, it's why ritual develops, right? It's why rain dances and human sacrifice. Every natural human impulse is to try and control our environment through cause and effect, and that's been useful to us as a species, right? Like, I shake the tree, the banana falls off. I eat the banana, cause and effect. That's awesome. But it's also backfired, because also, let's sacrifice a virgin so the sun rises tomorrow. It's a double-edged sword. And I think the danger now that we live in a post-enlightenment world, is still falling into this kind of instinctive desire to control uncontrollable variables through ritual.
Yeah, it's funny that we're just not taught from a young age that, I mean, some of us are, but typically we aren't taught from a young age that, things just happen. Like, I don't know, or I wasn't. I was always taught, like if something bad happens, like you should have been more careful. And I noticed myself saying these things to my children. I try to catch myself as many times as I can. And I'm like, no, don't say that. Just be like, hey, things happen.
We're raised in the paradigm now of things happen for a reason, and there's a bigger plan, because it's comforting, right?
Yeah.
If someone dies in a car accident, you want to be like, well, there's a bigger plan at play. But the dark side is, it makes you feel like you have an obligation to control these variables, even if and the more enlightened religions will give lip service to, God's not a vending machine, he's not a genie, like you cannot change his will by doing things. But there's still the unwritten assumption that if somebody is controlling these things, and that somebody has a human mind, or at least a mind capable of reason, then that's somebody that can be reasoned with and can be influenced.
Oh man, getting people to take their vice grips off of control and being able to just say those statements is some of the hardest work that I think I've done. I mean, I do marital therapy, for God's sakes, but I think it's just so difficult. There's a certain terror that enters in people's eyes, especially if they have like GAD or problems with worry, where when you say, well, what if you just don't worry about it? Like, and you're serious. You're like, I'm going to present you a situation, and then when it comes up, I'd like you to not worry about it, and then just observe them. It's crazy because they want to have that control, and I wonder if this idea of existentialism, or anything besides grand purpose and meaning, might give us the practice we need to approach those problems.
Yeah, I feel like it does. I feel like it shapes us in a way where we can at least approach that paradigm more naturally. Like, people are like, why are you picking on religion? Like, religion's harmless. I think this is one of the unsung harms that religion does, is it primes our brains to kind of push back against the idea that some things are inherently meaningless.
Yeah. I know. It was look at you. We sometimes we make fun of freshman 101 people. We've all been there though, and that happened to me. I had this aha moment, and it was just very difficult for me I rejected like nihilism, existentialism, all of that right out of the gate when I first read about them, because I was like, nope, because I just didn't want to face.
I don't want to live in a world like that.
Yeah, exactly. But it's another one of these valley situations. You're in a rut. Maybe once you get over the tough part, it's actually better on the other side, and that's the empirical question we're wondering today.
And that's what I feel. And again, it's hard to tell because it's such a subjective thing. But for people on the outside looking in who see it as a terrifying proposition, put your toes in, test the waters. It's really actually pretty comfortable. It's a nice place to be once you can let go. It's almost more of an Eastern religion thing, right? Like, I feel like in some ways Buddhism has a better grasp of human psychology than Christianity does, because Buddhism teaches about like letting go, in transit, like let go of attachment, let go of the illusion of control. It talks about how so many things that we perceive are just illusions. And when you cut out all the metaphysical bullshit, there's a lot of truth to Buddhism that doesn't exist in Western religion.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And is that, which way does the direction go there? Who knows? Like, is it that is our way of thinking because of that religion, or did it just so happen that those ways of thinking caused those religions, from some earlier influence,
Right.
kind of.
Yeah, I think it predates religion. Our desire to find cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
I think that led to religion more than religion leads to that. But I think right now it's almost like a chicken and egg thing. Like it's a circular. Like they're both into each other at this point.
Yeah. Yep. Well, cool, man. I know that you don't have a whole lot of time, but I thought this was an interesting discussion, especially because we are far out of our field here. Like, both of us have a little something to say from our points of view in our academic fields, but it's just speculation. Like, I just don't know.
Yeah, we would love to see data. I don't know if these studies have even been done, but I would love at least to see if there's a correlation in mental health and religion. I know there's a correlation with IQ, which is a very touchy subject for some people, but what about mental health? Like, that would be an interesting study. And unfortunately, because of the taboo that religion has with psychology right now, I don't think a lot of people are looking into that. But my hunch, my suspicion, my unfounded non-expertise, like intuition, is that it is actually healthier to have a realistic view of reality, even if it seems scary on the outside.
Yeah, that's my assumption too. I just don't. Yeah, I'd like to test that. One last thing, speaking of the psychology versus religion thing that I kind of introduced a few episodes ago. Here's an interesting thing I've noticed is, okay, so there's this article out right now called "Who Fact Checks the Fact Checkers?"
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard about this?
No.
It's by a conservative writer, an author. I say author. He's writes articles for, I don't remember which website, but he's one of their conservative writers. And he called into question because of all these data that have been coming out that show that, when it comes to truthfulness or truthiness, as Stephen Colbert would say, Democrats are kind of winning out.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do?
PolitiFact?
Yeah. So what do you do when data don't go your way? You question the data and the source, right? People typically do. Not if you're, scientific, but I mean, I'm talking about you, the royal.
If you want to conserve your worldview, which people tend to want to do.
Yeah, and so that happens in psychology a lot. We say things that are, like they say, reality has a liberal bias. We say things that are liberal or anti-religious, and then they start either attacking character or then discrediting psychology. And I'm just as scared that that's going to happen moving forward, because it's important, man. We do important shit, I think.
Yeah, I tend to agree. But yeah, it's an interesting question. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So find us on facebook.com/group/God Theory Podcast. Is that right?
Yeah, I was just on it. Man, I just got off. But yeah, groups/God Theory Podcast. Yeah, you can also follow us on twitter.com/God Theory Pod. We also got a comment the other day. I take it you got to leave pretty soon.
Yeah, let's hear the comment.
The comment was from Jim K, and he just said, "Nice discussion, guys. Always entertaining." And that was about our podcast 33, which unknowingly just went out. Sorry, guys. Should have went out a while back. But yeah. And, we had some activity on the Facebook page. People were, I posted some data about Christmas. People view it as more cultural than they do religious holiday already. So the war on Christmas, quote unquote, isn't really even a war on Christmas. Shut up. It's cultural. Yeah.
So next week the plan is JT's schedule should align with ours better, and we'll be able to do our secular student in a religious high school dilemma episode. And so anyone that's in a similar situation, that should be an interesting discussion from all three of our points of view.
Yeah. Well, cool. All right, then I'll let you off the hook, man. Have a good travel. I know that you won't, but maybe make it as sweet as you can,
It's transitory. Things will get better. It's out of my hands.
And if you're drinking disgusting medicine, well, spoonful of sugar with it. Just make it as sweet as you can.
Will do.
All right, man. Well, take care. See you guys next week.